There is a small white rock that we eat. It sounds ridiculous, but it's the only thing that prevented our ancestors from simply dying. Now, a healthy human's basic chemical composition consists of approximately 0.4% sodium chloride. This isn't a choice or some kind of culinary preference. Sodium chloride, commonly known as salt, is essential for nerve and muscle function, fluid regulation, and blood pressure control. Without it, the body simply stops working. Insufficient salt intake can lead to dehydration, low blood pressure, and eventually death. The symptoms are mundane: nausea, headaches, fatigue, and heart problems. In the end, the low salt presence, or hyponatremia, is what decides if you live or die. This information is not medical advice or diagnosis. Always see a healthcare professional or seek care.
We're going to track how a simple mineral lick led to the foundation of the first human cities. Consider the Paleolithic world. The air is damp, the earth is raw. Millions of years ago, the early hominids who appeared in the fossil record didn't have to worry about seasonings. They had a meat-heavy diet. Because animals obtained salt from groundwater, it entered their flesh, and the hunter-gatherer societies of the time simply absorbed the same minerals through the meat they consumed. It was a passive process. However, the map of the early world was not drawn by humans, but by animals. Early humans followed the hunting trails that animals used to find mineral licks. These predators and prey alike were drawn to these salt licks, and early humans followed them. Over time, these paths became roads, and these hunting trails eventually led to the establishment of human settlements. We essentially let the animals map the world for us. Around 12,000 years ago, the Neolithic revolution occurred, and humans stopped wandering. In places like Jericho, the start of the Neolithic period saw hunter-gatherers settle down, building round clay houses about 5 meters across. This is roughly the size of a modern small bedroom. They planted wheat, barley, and fig trees. It seemed like a promotion. They had stable food sources, but there was a catch. The transition to agriculture created a nutritional deficiency in salt. Because diets shifted toward grains and vegetables, the natural sodium chloride from meat-heavy diets vanished. These cereal and plant-based foods simply didn't have what the body needed. Suddenly, the dietary need for added salt became a matter of survival. They weren't just hungry for something that tasted good, they were biologically crashing. They had built permanent homes, but they had forgotten to pack the essential mineral that kept their nerves and muscles working. Animals did the mapping for us. Historians theorize that inland tribes discovered salt by following animals to salt deposits and lakes, while coastal people used evaporation pools. Our Paleolithic-era ancestors, who were nomadic hunter-gatherers, simply watched animals traveling to salt licks to find these mineral concentrations. If you were walking the shores of the Dead Sea, you would have seen beaches made of salt. Jericho was strategically located next to a natural spring and the Dead Sea, providing direct access to these crystals. Then there is the mineral halite, also known as rock salt, which is found in ancient dried-up seabeds. Sometimes these ancient salt deposits can be pushed through the planet's crust to create salt domes or mountain ranges. This is how salt can be sourced from evaporated seawater, which leaves behind sea salt crystals, or mined from underground saltwater deposits in salty lakes. Essentially, humans just followed the animals to the white crystals, and then they realized that the white crystals were the same thing the animals were eating. Archaeologists have noticed a pattern. Early human settlements were consistently built with access to both fresh water and salt. It was not a coincidence. Take Catalhoyuk in modern-day Turkey. This early city was built specifically next to a salt lake. This is where we see the first examples of salt production. People at Catalhoyuk boiled lake water in clay pots, using evaporation to leave the crystals behind. And then there is the object. In the ruins of this city, researchers found an 8,000-year-old salt shaker. Just a small piece of pottery, but it proves that salt had already become a household staple. Humans were not just finding salt, they were managing it. This obsession scaled up quickly. By 5000 BC, the effort became industrial. In Austria and China's Sichuan province, people were digging mine shafts as deep as 200 meters. That's about the height of a 60-story skyscraper. They were descending into the earth in total darkness in order to get more of that white powder. Something doesn't quite add up. We see these early cities clustered around salt, yet we have no way of knowing if they actually understood the biological need for it. There is a missing piece of evidence here. If you look at the archaeological record, it is difficult to prove that prehistoric humans used salt for preservation. The reason is frustratingly simple. Salt is in pretty much all fossils. Because it is a universal mineral, we cannot look at a piece of ancient fish or a grain of wheat and say this was salted on purpose. We are left with a void where the evidence should be. This leaves us with a genuine contradiction. Why would humans go to such extreme lengths to secure a mineral if they didn't realize there was a biological need for it? Fish packed in salt changed everything. For a prehistoric person, a fresh catch of fish was a luxury that lasted only a few hours before spoiling. But then they realized that packing fish in salt extended its viability from a few hours to weeks, months, or even years. It was no longer about the same biological need for sodium, but about the tool. The primary reason early agrarian settlers valued salt, and therefore the reason they settled up to the shores of the Dead Sea, was its ability to preserve foods by drawing out moisture. It is a simple, violent chemical process. Salt absorbs water, which effectively draws bacteria causing moisture out of meat or vegetables. Allowed is probably the operative word here. This process allows you to pickle produce and ensures that perishable goods are not wasted. By mastering food preservation, early humans could finally store meats and fish in quantities that had to survive times of famine. Salted fish, in particular, became the insurance policy of the Neolithic world. It allowed ancestors to survive periods of famine by ensuring that a calorie-dense protein source remained edible long after the season had ended. They didn't just find a rock that tasted good, they found a way to cheat death by dehydration. It is a remarkably simple chemical process. Salt draws moisture out of bacteria, effectively killing them by dehydration. This chemical violence is what allows a piece of fish to last for months. But the pursuit of this mineral didn't just save us from famine, it accidentally stumbled upon something even more potent. In Sichuan, China, while digging deep into the salt mines, the miners discovered natural gas. This led to the first recorded discovery of fossil fuel, which they used for heating. We essentially chased a seasoning for our fish, and in the process, we accidentally found the energy source that would eventually power the entire modern world. Geography became a matter of where the crystals were. Once the ability to preserve food was mastered, salt shifted from a stage of biological necessity to a global commodity. This created a set of specialized regions that we still recognize today. For instance, the coast of Brittany in France produces fleur de sel, a specific type of sea salt. In an English village called Malden, salt is still hand-harvested as Malden salt. These are the deeper deposits, like the Himalayan rock salt deposits found in the Kefra salt mines in Pakistan's Punjab region.
It is a strange reality that a simple mineral, once used to survive famine, now defines the most famous salt brands of the world. Fossilized remains indicate that hunter-gatherers were smoking and drying proteins tens of thousands of years before Jericho. This means the urge to preserve food was there long before the white crystals of the Dead Sea were exploited. We are talking about a biological requirement of just 0.4% of our body mass, yet this single mineral became the primary driver of imperial wealth. It is a strange contrast. A tiny fraction of our body composition, but 100% of the global trade that built the first empires. Despite all the evidence, we are still left with a lingering mystery. We can identify the salt shakers, the mines, and the same chemical process of preservation, but we cannot pinpoint the exact moment of the eureka moment. Because salt is a universal mineral, it is impossible to prove which piece of ancient fish was salted on purpose and which was just a result of natural mineralization. The first human to realize that salt stops spoilage is a ghost in the archaeological record, the same way the first person to realize that salt was a biological necessity is a ghost. Both are simply gone. We treat salt as a cheap white powder that we shake over our fries, but for our ancestors, it was the only thing that prevented them from simply dying. A healthy human needs 0.4% sodium chloride to keep their nerves and muscles functioning. Without it, the possibilities of death by hyponatremia could occur. This information is not medical advice or a diagnosis. You should consult a healthcare professional for any health concerns. They followed animals to salt licks, let the animals map the world for us, and eventually discovered that this white rock could stop food from spoiling. This is the irony of our survival. The humble white crystal that we now ignore at the table was the very thing that allowed our ancestors to stop wandering and start building the first cities. It ends up that we didn't just find a seasoning, we found a tool that allowed us to survive the lean times. And in the process, we accidentally found the energy source for the same modern world we now use to shake salt onto our fries.